And welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. House lawmakers are returning to Washington on day 43 of the shutdown. A vote this afternoon could finally end the impasse. We're going to look at how soon that could impact SNAP benefits and air travel. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says substantial tariff announcements are coming in the next couple of days. He also mentioned when Americans may start to feel an overall difference in inflation. President Trump says he has an obligation to pursue legal action against the BBC. His comments on the broadcaster's documentary that edited his speech in a misleading way. The United States plans to strike its last penny for circulation. What to know about the last ever 1-cent coin as the penny gets phased out. In China, a bridge partially collapsed just months after being opened. What we know about the incident so far.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
And today is Wednesday, November 12th. I'm Paul Graney. Great to have you here. The longest federal government shutdown in U.S. history could be over within days. This is the first time in nearly 2 months House lawmakers are gathering in Washington for floor votes. They're poised to consider a stopgap funding bill that the Senate has already approved. And Democrats, though, largely oppose the bill because it doesn't guarantee that certain Obamacare subsidies won't expire. But if it does become law, the government will reopen and furloughed workers will return to their jobs. Here's a look at how quickly that could impact SNAP benefits and air travel.
If the government reopens, how long will it take for things to get back to normal? Many are asking that question now that the shutdown appears close to ending. Today, the House is set to vote on a stopgap funding bill that's already through the Senate. The president is signaling he'd sign it. If that happens, officials say SNAP benefits could resume promptly.
It appears that we're on a glide path up in Washington where the SNAP benefits will be fully honored, hopefully by the end of this week.
That's likely a relief for the more than 40 million Americans who rely on SNAP for food.
I'm trying to do my best to shield my daughter from how concerned I am, but at the same time, she is seeing the difference in our cupboards. She's seeing the difference in her meals.
The timeline for air travel returning to normal is less certain. The FAA is still forcing flight cancellations due to air traffic controller shortages. Transportation Secretary Duffy says they'd get 70% of their back pay within 48 hours of the government reopening. But
I'm concerned that we're not going to have on day one controllers come back into the towers right away.
Duffy says he'll rely on data to decide when the FAA can lift shutdown-related flight restrictions.
We're trying to manage risk in the system to make sure people fly and fly safely.
And the Supreme Court has granted the Trump administration an extension on food stamp payments. The nation's High Court has extended a temporary pause on a judge's order that would have forced the administration to fully fund food aid during the government shutdown. The decision keeps about $4 billion from reaching the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP for short. One justice dissented, voting in favor of resuming payments. The pause is now set to expire tomorrow night as Congress moves closer to ending the longest shutdown in U.S. history. The administration argued that the courts can't legally reallocate federal funds and that only Congress can resolve the crisis by reopening the government. SNAP benefits have already lapsed for millions, forcing families to rely on food pantries as lawmakers work to end the shutdown. And the bill moving through Congress to end the shutdown is under scrutiny. It includes a provision allowing 8 Republican senators to seek hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages over alleged privacy violations. The alleged incidents stem from the Biden administration's investigation of the January 6th Capitol breach. The clause would make it retroactively illegal, in most cases, to obtain a senator's phone records without notification. It would also let those affected sue the Justice Department for up to $500,000 per violation, plus legal fees. The Justice Department could choose to settle the claims rather than fight them in court, but Democrats are criticizing the measure, saying it would hand large taxpayer-funded payouts to certain Republican lawmakers. The phone records in question were obtained under subpoenas issued during Special Counsel Jack Smith's probe into the efforts challenging the 2020 election results. And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says substantial tariff announcements are on the way. He specifically mentioned coffee and bananas. Here's Bessent speaking on Fox News.
The president says, I'm going to lower the rates, tariff rates on Brazil and Vietnam and other places to try to bring the price of coffee down. What else are you doing?
Well, it's tough to do a lot of specific things, but I can tell you, Brian, you're going to see some substantial announcements over the next couple of days in terms of things we don't grow here in the United States. You know, coffee being one of them, bananas, other fruits, things like that. So that will bring the prices down very quickly.
Bessent said on Fox News that the administration would cut tariffs on many things not grown in the U.S. President Trump also mentioned earlier in Fox News that tariffs would come down on coffee. The drop in banana prices would also be noticeable. CNBC reported that they have long been seen as inflation-proof, but consumers have witnessed a surprising recent rise in price. Bessent also said Americans would start feeling better about inflation in the first or second quarter of 2026. Brazil is the #1 source of coffee in the United States. President Trump and Brazilian President Lula spoke in October, and Trump mentioned then that he thinks the U.S. and Brazil will make a new trade deal. And President Trump says he has a, quote, obligation to sue the BBC. He made the comment during an interview on Fox News that aired yesterday. Let's take a listen.
They actually changed my January 6th speech, which was a beautiful speech, which was a very calming speech, and they made it sound radical. And they actually changed it. What they did was rather incredible. They're showing me the results later on, the results of what they did, how they butchered it up.
But tonight you are saying to our viewers that you will go forward and file a defamation lawsuit against the BBC.
Well, I think I have an obligation to do it because you can't allow people to do that.
The BBC has been plunged into its biggest crisis in decades after its two most senior staff, Director General Tim Davie and Head of News Deborah Turnus, quit over the weekend. That follows criticism over accusations of bias at the BBC, including how it edited the speech by President Trump. The broadcaster spliced together two parts of a January 6, 2021 speech that occurred nearly an hour apart. The end result made it appear like Trump directed his supporters to breach the U.S. Capitol. Trump has threatened to sue the BBC for at least $1 billion. BBC Chair Samin Shah has apologized for editing the footage. Spokesperson said the broadcaster is reviewing the letter sent by Trump's legal team. And President Trump is expected to host a private dinner tonight with several top business leaders. Administration official told Reuters that guests could include the chief executives of NASDAQ and JP Morgan Chase, though the representatives did not immediately respond to requests for comment. JP Morgan has announced a decade-long investment program worth more than $1 trillion. It's aimed at industries central to national security, supply chain manufacturing, and energy independence. The penny is suffering the same fate as the dodo bird, the 8-track player. After 238 years, the U.S. is minting its last 1-cent coin. Now, earlier this year, President Trump announced that he ordered the nation to stop making the penny. He said that each one cost nearly 4 cents to create. Other coins, including the nickel, the dime, and the quarter, will remain in circulation. Although the penny had already become obsolete for many consumers, its removal is causing problems for some merchants who will now have to round prices either up or down. And dropping the penny will create a greater need for nickels, which are more expensive coin to mint. And House lawmakers are back in D.C. after 2 months. They're expected to vote to reopen the government soon. Now, the discussion is pivoting more to health care. Two experts join us for a deeper dive after the break. And JFK's grandson is running for Congress in New York, while Democrats Elaine Luria in Virginia and Jordan Wood in Maine launch bids in key battleground districts. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm Paul Graney. House lawmakers are back in Washington after nearly 2 months. The chamber will now vote on a measure to reopen the government after an overnight hearing. NTD's Melina Weiskup reports.
Overnight at 1:30 a.m., House lawmakers advanced the Senate-passed bill to reopen the government. It's very likely to easily pass the lower chamber, paving the way for a reopened government very soon.
I just want to apologize to any Americans who are out there who still have flight cancellations or delays today. I want to apologize to the many American families who were made to go hungry over the last several weeks, our troops and other federal employees who are wondering where their next paycheck would come from.
The full House will vote later today, but those who are far away could see flight delays due to the prolonged shutdown. One congressman from Wisconsin dodging the airport altogether.
Because they shut down the government, the Democrats, the flights are too unreliable. So I'm going to ride on a motorcycle. It's going to take about 16 hours or so. It's going to be a little chilly.
Speaker Johnson needs all Republican votes because Democrats are whipping against the measure.
What we've seen over the last several weeks is the Republican refusal to even extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for working class Americans for a year.
The House Democrat leader last night in committee proposed a 3-year extension for Obamacare subsidies, which failed on a party line vote, making it crystal clear that Republicans will not extend the health care program without major reforms.
The cost of health care is entirely on the lap of the Democrats. This is Obamacare we're living under.
A group of bipartisan senators are now negotiating with the White House on how to reduce skyrocketing premiums. Dr. and Senator Roger Marshall is one involved in these negotiations. He put forth these ideas.
We're sending $150 billion a year to big insurance companies. Let's take that $150 billion. Let's give a part of that to consumers, to patients, and set up better HSAs for them. Give them more choices out there. Let's expand community health centers where people can get access to more primary care as well.
Now, Republicans could either try to strip out and reform the pieces of Obamacare that they see as not so great, or they could propose a totally new health care policy agenda, which looks more likely. That could tee up another showdown in the beginning of next year. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
And joining us now is Mike Leon, NTD News contributor and host of the podcast Can We Please Talk? Also with us, Richard Stern, Director of Budget Policy at the Heritage Foundation and a former budget advisor to House Speaker Mike Johnson. Gentlemen, good morning. Great to have you here. Thanks so much for coming on. Mike, we'll start with you. We know that some Democrats have come out against this deal because it doesn't extend those federal health care subsidies. Why have the other Democrats moved forward with it anyway?
Well, good to see you guys on this Wednesday morning. Well, I mean, the short answer is the Democrats that have moved forward in the Senate are not going to face any political fallout from this. None of them are on the ballot in 2026, as numerous outlets have reported and has been ad nauseum said to me by Democratic strategists, right? Like, they're not going to feel the impact at the ballot box. So if you're going to have any Democrats that are going to come out and not, toe the party line and go along with Democrats and break and side with Republicans to get to the 60 threshold, it would be these Democrats that are not on the ballot. But in terms of what Hakeem Jeffries said there in the package that just played, one of the big things, look, I can speak to this just from personal experience, right? Like, lost my W-2 job in 23, have, used the Affordable Care Act and especially with some of the coverage benefits to be able to care for my daughter who's on the spectrum, right? Losing these subsidies, especially for somebody, let's say, that makes less money than me, Paul, is a huge thing that's going to be happening in 2026. The premiums are going to go up across the income thresholds. And, that especially with the way unemployment is now in different sectors of the economy, this is tough. And I get why Democrats stood the line on this. And I get why there should be more attention drawn to this about the true healthcare crisis that we have, which is an affordability crisis in and of itself, that people can't afford to pay for out-of-pocket procedures and insurance out of pocket if they don't get it from their employer.
Right. Richard, on that point, for our viewers concerned about rising healthcare costs, we know Democrats say there will be a vote on extending those subsidies before they expire at the end of the year. But before then, is it inevitable, as Mike says, that premiums will rise for people?
So I think one of the things that's important to recognize here is that part of why premiums have gone up so much is because of the subsidies and the regulations that came along with them. So, Obamacare and then this extended Obamacare that we had during COVID layered on more money, but didn't make it easier for there to be more supply. And so it's driven prices up quite a bit. It's also the case that the regulations on these insurance products mean that mostly young workers with families are subsidizing procedures that frankly should have been more in the realm of Medicaid or Medicare. And so it's created an individual market that is hard for employers to deal with, that is making it harder for employers to be outside of, and is putting so much more of the overall burden of the healthcare system on the workers we're talking about. And so the confluence of these is actually not good for workers. And we have to remember that the emergency subsidies that we're talking about here mostly funnel benefits to the well-off, again, at the expense of most low and middle income workers. So, look, I understand why Democrats are showboating on this, frankly, but it's not a well-designed program, and it certainly doesn't have the interests of most American workers at heart.
So you think there's something more systemic here, not just throw more money at the problem. Richard, while I have you, this is something from the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget. I'm not sure if you saw it. They said that the bill, it's been called a CR, a clean CR, but this nonpartisan group says the bill effectively codifies $3.4 trillion of new borrowing by wiping the pay-as-you-go, the pay-go scorecard, and provides for additional deficit increases until the end of the current Congress. I don't want to get into the weeds here, Richard, but it sounds like this bill is likely to get us into even more debt. Can you clear this up for us?
Yeah, so what I would say is that this is kind of a wonky parliamentary thing in Congress, that the tax cut bill earlier in the year would trigger some across-the-board cuts to welfare programs and a few other federal programs that, frankly, no one thought was going to happen, that everybody was expecting that Congress would waive that so the automatic cuts wouldn't happen. That's what they're talking about. Now, look, as much as I would like to see spending cuts, the truth is this was planned, and at the same time, I disagree with them that deficits from tax cuts add to the burden on the American public. What creates a burden is government spending. By cutting taxes, you're not adding to the aggregate burden on Americans. You're shifting how that burden is felt. So I think they're being disingenuous to say that this is adding to the burdens of government on the American public.
Mike, which party comes out of this shutdown better off politically?
Oh, Paul, that's a great question. If I knew that, I wouldn't be on this panel right now. I'd be flying in my helicopter somewhere to some private island. I mean, look, there's two ways to look at this, right? Tim Kaine has been doing the media rounds because he's been getting the most flack for this, and I've seen him argue with some other host on some other networks. And he said, look, I've got over 500,000 federal employees that live in my district. If I can take care of them and extend SNAP and WIC benefits for them and get them back to work and get them back pay and guarantee that nobody will get let go going into the next, 3 months or so, January 30th when it expires, I'm going to take that deal. And I think the Democrats that came out against the party line, we want people to put country over party. We've been begging for people to put country over party. So I get why they did it. And again, they won't face any consequence. Now, back to the overarching question, Paul, and this is the one thing I want to stress to everybody. Republicans in 2024 won the elections. They control the House, they control the Senate, they control the White House. Every Republican that I know and their mother has told me that a mandate was sent from the American people. Therefore, that means they have to govern. So to label this a Republican shutdown, a Democratic shutdown, Republicans are in charge of the government. They're going through the same battles that Democrats went through with Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin and not ending the filibuster. They could have done some of these things to reopen the government and start this process a long time ago. And the American people right now need to decide in 2026, do they believe the Republican argument that the Democrats caused this because of the ACA subsidies, or do they believe the Democratic argument that, hey, that the Republicans are truly to blame for all of this because of them being in charge? It's going to play out in the ballot box very, very soon in 2026. I don't think either of them have come out really too strongly from this, but we're going to find out soon, Paul.
Maybe neither party, Mike. Richard, on 2026, we saw that Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene, she criticized her party for what she said was just not taking people's health care cost concerns seriously enough. She said it's her constituents' biggest issue. So how will Republicans approach that issue, perhaps before any potential vote on it later this year?
Well, it would be nice to get some of the deregulation I was talking about, something that would actually allow health insurance products that are cheaper but give better service, that are more tailored to the needs of middle and low income working families. But, to be fair, the establishment of both parties don't always do the right thing. It's hard to know whether Republicans will sit down and actually put together the correct policies. But, I do want to stress as well, though, part of the problem here is that, the truth, neither party has actually had full control over the government in many, many years because of the filibuster, which is a overt thing from the majority that allows 40% of the Senate, which Democrats have right now, and when Democrats control Congress, Republicans have, to stop any vote in Congress. It's a way to respect minority rights within the Congress, but it does mean that as much as we say that one party might have a trifecta, no party actually ever truly controls all of the branches of government. But that does get in the way of being able to have decisive action to do things. So, stay tuned as always, but it'll always be a compromise product.
Absolutely. Mike, through the shutdown, I've sensed that Democrats are, intentionally or unintentionally focusing more on affordability and cost of living issues than before. Have you sensed that, and is that a winning strategy for them?
I've sensed it. I've seen it. We saw it in the vote margin totals that happened in New Jersey with Mikey Sherrill and Jack Ciattarelli. We saw it in the vote margin totals with Abigail Spanberger. We saw it with Zoran Mamdani as well in New York City. I mean, everyone gets asked a question during the Democratic primary there about where's their first trip, and everyone picked Israel, and he said, I'm going to be here in New York City fixing this affordability crisis. That's the answer people want to hear. Whether or not he can actually solve that is a different story, but at least campaigning on it, grassroots effort, talking about the problem, saying, look, these are the types of things that I do want to implement that will make it more affordable around this city. Just taking Zoran as an example in isolation. Whether he accomplishes it or not is not the question, because the question is, for 6 months, he campaigned on affordability, affordability, affordability. President Trump did the same exact thing, by the way. Affordability, 2019, this is what you were making. Are you feeling that right now? And the Biden economy, they just couldn't speak to the actual, they kept getting the data without talking about the real impact Americans were feeling. It is a winning strategy, especially that voters are creatures of the moment. You can't look at voters anything other than the day of. You can't look at them in the future. You can learn from them in the past, but you can't look at them in the future. They're creatures of the moment. You got to speak to the affordability crisis if we're going through the same things that we're going through right now in 2026.
And Richard, to wrap up, President Trump, he hit the headlines over the past couple of days with his own affordability proposal. He's pitched a 50-year mortgage. You're a numbers guy. You're a budget guy. What are your objective thoughts on a 50-year home mortgage for Americans?
So I think it's a little complicated because the question is, well, why don't we have them already? It's because of a mixture of government overregulation, but also that the government has subsidized mortgages in a way that I think ultimately has been unhelpful to most American families. So because of the way the government does that, it would be nice to open up to have 50-year mortgages. However, it's critical that whatever the devil in the details are of that plan doesn't add to the malign government distortionary subsidies that'll make things worse and actually increase house inflation and make home ownership less affordable, despite putting a label of a 50-year mortgage on it. So the devils are in the details there. It could be a good proposal. It might be a very bad one, depending on that. But, to me, this stresses the other important part here, which is that, everybody is messaging on affordability because people need it. People are suffering these burdens from government that make it harder to afford their own lives. But it's not enough to promise it. You have to actually do policies that will do that. And frankly, the more government spends, the more it regulates, the larger government is, the less and less affordable life is. That's what's happened over the last half century.
You sound like you want to get your hands on Mila's chainsaw, Richard. Richard Stern and Mike Leon. Gentlemen, appreciate it. Have a good one.
You too. Thank you so much.
And Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy is warning of travel chaos. That's if Congress fails to end the government shutdown by this weekend. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on that. Plus, we hear from passengers caught in the travel breakdown.
The warning comes after one of the worst travel weekends since the shutdown began over 40 days ago, with more than 4,500 flights canceled. Thousands of air traffic controllers have been calling in sick, having gone weeks without pay, forcing airports to slow operations to maintain safety. Transport Secretary Duffy says 6% of recent cancellations came from the FAA, speaking on Fox News.
And that's because the number one job is to keep the airspace safe.
Duffy says if air traffic controllers get paid, the country will be well on the way to recovery.
But if they don't get paid, I made this point today, you're going to see airlines seriously consider grounding their aircraft. They're not going to fly if we get to Friday and the government's not open.
Airlines canceled 1,200 flights yesterday as air traffic control staffing improved significantly ahead of an expected end to a record-setting government shutdown as soon as today. On Monday, President Trump threatened to dock the pay of any controller who didn't return to work. The shutdown has forced 13,000 air traffic controllers and 50,000 TSA agents to work without pay. Martin Nguyen was traveling to Colorado Springs to visit the Garden of the Gods to get in touch with nature.
So while we were there, we received a text message telling us that our original flight returning back home was going to be postponed for a day after the original date.
Martin says it was a good thing he was staying with family, so he had a place to stay.
But yeah, definitely was not prepared for that. So we had to contact our work and everything to make sure that we were able to get that taken care of.
Traveler Mike Ricks says reopening the government is the right decision.
We have so many people that are dependent on government subsidies, other government programs.
Ricks says he's worried about returning home Friday evening.
And so we're keeping close tabs on our flight and making sure that's still on track. But yes, definitely worried about getting back home.
Over 5 million passengers have been affected by staffing-related delays or cancellations since the shutdown began on October 1st. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And there could soon be another Kennedy in Washington, D.C. Jack Schulzberg has announced a bid for Congress. He's the grandson of former President John F. Kennedy. Schulzberg is running to replace retiring Congressman Jerry Nadler, who represents New York's 12th congressional district. In a video announcing his campaign, the Democrat focused on affordability while criticizing President Trump. He could be facing a rather crowded field of challengers, though, including former Congresswoman Caroline Maloney and Cameron Kasky, who is the survivor of the Parkland High School shooting. And former Democratic Congresswoman Elaine Luria is making another bid for her old House seat in Virginia's 2nd District. Luria served on the committee investigating the January 6th Capitol breach. Here she is explaining her decision.
When I go back to Washington, I'm going to work with colleagues on both sides of the aisle to make sure that we're delivering the things that Virginians and Americans need. And what's on the top of everybody's mind right now is the high cost of everything. So that is really the focus that we need to do. We need to listen to people, listen to their concerns, and act on it.
Luria lost the seat in 2022 to Republican Jennifer Kiggins, who is expected to re-seek election. The Coastal District, which includes Norfolk and Virginia Beach, remains one of the nation's most competitive. Luria says she hopes to focus on veterans' issues, apart from the rising cost of living. Republicans, meanwhile, are already dismissing her candidacy, calling her out of touch with voters. The race is shaping up as an early test in next year's battle for control of Congress. And up in Maine, Democrat Jordan Wood is ending his Senate campaign to run for the state's newly opened 2nd Congressional District. It's a key battleground state vacated by Democratic Congressman Jared Golden. Wood says the decision comes after Golden's surprise retirement, calling the race one of the most competitive in the country. He argued that Democrats must hold the district, which President Trump carried by 10 points in 2024. Other potential Democratic contenders include State Auditor Matt Dunlap and former State Senate President Troy Jackson. On the Republican side, former Governor Paul LePage is also running. And a high-ranking aide to 2 New York governors is accused of secretly working for China. Jury selection for the trial for Linda Sun starts today in New York. Linda Sun, a Chinese-born naturalized citizen, worked in a number of agencies under New York Governors Kathy Hochul and Andrew Cuomo. Prosecutors say for years, Sun took gifts, concert tickets, and millions in kickbacks from Chinese officials. She also faces charges of acting as an undisclosed agent of the Chinese regime. Prosecutors also say Sun helped shape state policy in Beijing's favor and shut out Taiwan. Sun and her husband are also accused of laundering millions of dollars into luxury homes and cars, but both deny any wrongdoing. A federal appeals panel will hear arguments this afternoon on whether a spending law passed in July that ended Medicaid reimbursements for Planned Parenthood can remain in effect while legal challenges continue. President Trump's tax and spending cut bill targets organizations that provide abortions and receive more than $800,000 a year in Medicaid reimbursements. Planned Parenthood has argued the law violates the Constitution, while anti-abortion activists applauded the legislation. The First Circuit Court of Appeals in Boston ruled the law could go into effect in September, even as the case proceeds in a lower court. The three-judge panel of the appeals court is expected to preside over a hearing today at 2 p.m. We'll keep you updated. And now we'll look at the weather. The first taste of winter is here. A powerful blast of Arctic air plunging much of the country into a deep freeze this week. Here's a look closer at some early winter weather.
From Alabama to Florida and Georgia, nearly 18 million people spent the first half of the week under a freeze warning, a shock to many after temperatures just days ago were in the 70s and 80s. In Jacksonville, Florida, a low of 28 degrees broke the city's previous daily record for November 11th, set back in 1977. The cold was so extreme that Florida even issued what's jokingly called a falling iguana advisory. The forecaster with the National Weather Service explained that when temperatures dip below 40, iguanas begin to fall from trees. Posts of stunned reptiles appeared across social media as Floridians bundled up in coats, a rare sight even for November. Meanwhile, across the Great Lakes and Northeast, heavy lake-effect snow brought hazardous driving in whiteout conditions. Some towns in Michigan and New York were buried under nearly half a foot of snow earlier this week, with wind chills well below freezing. Communities like Buffalo, Syracuse, and Niagara Falls woke up Tuesday under winter weather advisories, with forecasters predicting up to 6 inches of accumulation. In the Midwest, Indiana recorded its first measurable snowfall this season on Monday, causing more than 100 accidents in just one day. And in California, forecasters are tracking an atmospheric river expected to bring heavy rain and mountain snow later this week. The long plume of tropical moisture that formed over the Pacific Ocean will begin drenching the San Francisco Bay Area starting today, before quickly moving south. And in parts of the south, the frigid air created something beautiful, so-called frost flowers. Thin layers of ice emerge from stems of local plants in Kentucky and Arkansas. The current cold snap won't last too long. Forecasters say much of the U.S. will warm up by the second half of the week. Moving up north to Quebec, hundreds of thousands were without power yesterday after the province's first major snowstorm of the season over the weekend. Montreal's weather agency recorded nearly 8 inches of snow.
Stay warm, America. And President Trump is urging Israel's president to pardon Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, calling the corruption case against him political and unjustified. I'm Paul Graney. This is World Watch. President Trump is asking Israel's president to consider pardoning Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. President Isaac Herzog's office today confirming the letter asking for the pardon, saying that any request for clemency must follow official procedures. Trump wrote that he respects Israel's justice system, but said he believes the case against Netanyahu is political and unjustified. Trump called the prime minister a longtime ally who fought against him against Iran. Netanyahu was indicted in 2019 on 3 corruption charges, including allegations he accepted over $200,000 in gifts from businessmen. He denies any wrongdoing, calling the charges a left-wing effort to unseat him. Herzog, though largely a ceremonial leader, has the power to issue pardons in exceptional cases. And Turkey said 20 of its soldiers were killed when a military transport plane crashed in Georgia yesterday. The aircraft had taken off from Azerbaijan and was returning to Turkey when it went down near the Georgian border. Turkey's state-run news agency says the aircraft lost contact shortly after entering Georgian airspace and did not issue a distress signal. And Ankara has not provided a cause for the crash, but said that Turkish and Georgian authorities have started inspections at the site. And Colombia has ordered its security forces to stop sharing intelligence with the United States. Now, this follows U.S. military strikes on suspected drug smuggling boats in the Caribbean. President Gustavo Petro said cooperation will remain suspended as long as what he called missile attacks on vessels continue. Tensions between Bogota and Washington have increased in recent months after President Trump accused Petro of encouraging drug production. Trump also imposed aid cuts and new tariffs on Colombia. Taiwan has evacuated more than 8,000 people as tropical storm Fung-Wong brings heavy rain and flooding to the island's east and south. The storm killed at least 27 people in the Philippines before losing a little strength on its approach to Taiwan. 51 people were reported injured today as floodwaters inundated homes and villages. Television footage showing waist-deep waters and cars swept away by surging floods. Forecasters said Fung-Wong would graze Taiwan's southern tip before moving back out to sea later today. And Ukraine's prime minister said today the government has suspended a justice minister as part of an investigation into corruption in the energy sector. Here's what we know so far.
Ukraine's government has suspended its justice minister amid an investigation into corruption in the energy sector that has caused public anger. In a Facebook post, Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko wrote on Tuesday, "We held an emergency government session and approved the decision to suspend Herman Halushenko from his duties." Authorities have charged 7 individuals in relation to an alleged $100 million kickback scheme involving senior energy officials, in a case that has intensified scrutiny of Kyiv's battle against corruption. Ukrainians are particularly sensitive to accusations of kickbacks in the energy sector, as many endure lengthy daily blackouts, while the country defends itself against massive Russian attacks on its infrastructure. Halushenko previously served as energy minister. He said on Facebook that the suspension for the duration of the investigation is a civilized and appropriate scenario, and that he will defend himself in the legal arena and prove his position without sharing further details about the probe. His ministry said he is under investigation, but did not specify whether this is in relation to the energy corruption case being pursued by the National Anti-Corruption Bureau.
And now over to France, where a court has opened a criminal probe into TikTok after allegations that its algorithm pushed minors towards suicide. The case follows multiple family lawsuits and a damning parliamentary report calling the app a dangerous algorithmic trap. NTD international correspondent David Vives reports from Paris.
France's justice system has opened a preliminary investigation into social media giant TikTok, following concerns that its algorithm could push minors towards suicide. This follows recent cases of teenagers who committed suicide across the country, and a lawsuit filed by 7 families accusing TikTok of exposing their children to content that encouraged self-harm. The Commission heard from over 170 experts and received 30,000 testimonies from the public. One teenager testified before lawmakers. "At first I saw videos about art and music, but soon everything turned darker. I fell into a harmful loop." Investigators are now examining several potential offenses, including the promotion of methods for taking one's own life. A TikTok spokesperson told Reuters that the Chinese company categorically rejects what it calls the Commission's misleading presentation. French lawmakers have been scrutinizing TikTok for years. In 2023, former Senator André Gattolin contributed to a report on the platform. He says there are signs that the Chinese Communist Party may use TikTok as a tool in its warfare operations.
Generally speaking, social networks like Facebook and others become profitable fairly quickly, turning a profit after 4, 5, or 6 years. TikTok, through Binance, has been around for many years, and they have more expenses than they have resources. They don't sell personal data, and for good reason. They don't market it because the destination is the Chinese regime. regime, the Chinese Communist Party, which means filing as many people as possible. So the driving idea behind TikTok is not that TikTok should become a leader in its sector according to the accepted rules of international trade or capitalism, so to speak. The idea is to introduce a quasi-military offensive dimension, which could be described as hybrid warfare, in order to truly undermine the integrity and unity of a nation.
In July, TikTok was fined $615 million by an EU agency after an Irish court found that users' data was accessible from China and insufficiently protected. Gatolin says this mass data collection effectively weaponizes TikTok against its users.
We know there's a massive collection of data. It's a way of gaining control over the future of our societies, and that's extremely serious. TikTok said that there is no data transfer, but we have seen in investigations that there were Chinese computer scientists from ByteDance who broke into the app and then transferred data and stole it. You know, all these systems are called backdoors, and so if you leave the door open, you can't say that this is a robbery, I guess.
A parliamentary report published in September 2025 recommended the ban of TikTok for teenagers younger than 15 years old. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
And the TikTok spokesperson told Reuters that the company invests heavily in age-appropriate experiences for teens. The company said it has over 50 preset features to support teen well-being and removes 9 out of 10 videos that violate its rules before anyone sees them. And the new bridge in southwestern China's Sichuan province has collapsed just months after it opened. Authorities say no casualties were reported. That's after part of the 2,500-foot-long Hongqi Bridge gave way yesterday. Officials closed the bridge a day earlier after cracks appeared on nearby slopes and roads, warning of potential landslides. Officials confirming yesterday the mountainside gave way, triggering landslides that caused the bridge and its approach road to collapse. Dramatic video on Chinese social media showing the bridge buckling before falling into the river below. The bridge was built earlier this year as part of a national highway to Tibet and is now the subject of an official investigation. And an ensemble of 374 bagpipers has claimed a new world record in Melbourne, Australia, with over 370 pipers playing in unison. Welcome back. I'm Paul Graney. In New York City yesterday, thousands of veterans were celebrated as the nation marked the 250th anniversary of our armed forces. NTD's Dave Martin has the report.
I'm here at the 106th Annual Veterans Day Parade here in New York City, asking veterans what this day means to them.
Yeah, Veterans Day is a day for us veterans. We serve the country. That's what veterans do, serve our country, give up our lives. You know, to sign a check on that dotted line and stuff, we're up to our lives. That's what Veterans Day is for me.
All my friends that I've lost over the years, I served from 1970 to 1976 in the United States Army, and later on I rejoined the Army at the end of 1976 to keep alive all those that did not make it, and that's why I continue to serve. I'm a member of the American Legion for 45 years.
Veterans Day has always been special to me. I'm the sixth New Yorker, native New Yorker, to actually wear a uniform in my family, and we all went to wars going back to World War I. So it's always been special, that family connection with me. And then again, you know, we always say it's not just a parade, it is the largest veterans reunion in the country. And it's iconic to be here on Fifth Avenue every year, no matter what the weather is.
So on this day, New York City honors those veterans who've served their country and thanks them for all they've done. This is Dave Martin for NTD News.
And hundreds of bagpipers claimed a new world record today in Melbourne, Australia. They played a rock and roll classic, It's a Long Way to the Top. Known as the Great Melbourne Bagpipe Bash, the eclectic performance took place in Melbourne's Federation Square. Thousands of spectators crammed the square for the world record attempt. Many pipers had to squeeze through the crowd to the stage area. Organizers said the oldest piper was 98 years old. The Australian Book of Records confirmed that 374 pipers had together broken a record set in 2012. The local official calls it a proud moment.
There are hundreds and hundreds of people here from the public to watch this very special moment. In 2012, the first world record was set with 333 pipers playing together in Sofia in Bulgaria. And we're hoping to break that record here today in Melbourne, and I think we'll be very proud about it as a city and as a nation.
Well, I've been playing bagpipes since I was 9, and I'm just sort of thinking this would be a bit of fun towards the end of my career. Go out with a bang.
Having been declared world record holders, the massive pipers played Happy Birthday on request, followed by an impromptu Amazing Grace to a cheering crowd, many using their phones to record the moment. And if you have any feedback on the show, maybe you'd like to see us cover something in particular, send us an email at news.today@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. And for round-the-clock original news coverage, watch us live at ntd.com/live or just download our NTD app. We'll cover more news right after this break.